Hi, welcome to this walkthrough where I'm going to show you how to recreate my text to voice function where I can put a whole huge piece of research that either Claude or Perplexity or OpenAI have done and get that synthesized into a voice file that I can listen to as I'm walking. And I was thinking a lot about how to do this, and I don't think showing it to you by going into the command line and saying, hey, type this, type that, while it may be quicker, is probably not helpful. So I am going to, as much as possible, use the user interface on Google Cloud, which is where I built it. And for any of you who are going, this is going to cost me a lot of money. I've been using it really heavily, really aggressively for a month. And my monthly bill was £1.40. And that is another realization about my human in the loop is we can now get very much closer to where the compute and the work actually gets done, which is on these services, and not have to pay SaaS platform pricing to do jobs. So let me just show you how it works. My other decision was to create this completely from scratch. So you're here in Google Cloud, start a new project. And if you're doing this for the first time, you're going to have to do this anyway. Give it a name. Let's call it text to voice and just create it. And the reason why I'm doing this in this way is because it'll perfectly mimic your experience. So let's go to this project. It's completely neat. And now that you're here, there are a few services that we're going to need. The first one is we're going to have to create two buckets. So go to the left-hand side and go on cloud storage and click on buckets. This is going to be, call these whatever you like. This is how the files are going to arrive. By having two buckets, I can clean them out periodically, really simply. I just go delete everything in here, delete everything in here. And then choose your region. I'm in Europe, so I'll choose Europe. You can also choose specific regions, but these costs here really shouldn't worry you. So go ahead and do that. Leave everything as standard. Keep going. And for this bucket, public access will be prevented is correct, because this is just where your text file sits. So we've got that. So in your buckets, you have now got one text input -md. Let's create another one. My voice file is 2. That'll probably work. I'm going to put this into Europe as well, or wherever you want to put it. Click continue. Standard. This is fine. On this one, though, you want to uncheck this, because this one we want to have public. And if you think about it, this is the file where you're going to have your voice file. You can make it private, of course. But the reason why you want it public is because you want to be able to click that link and listen to it anywhere on your phone. So you want it publicly accessible. And look, at the end of the day, if someone guesses your voice file output, all they're going to hear is some research you've done. Not really the end of the world. So untick this. And then there's one more thing that we need to do once this is run. If you go into these buckets, you can see that it's still not public. Go to permissions, grant access, and type in all users. Tell all users that they want storage object viewer. And that's all they're going to be able to do. And it says, are you sure? You go, yes. So when you now look at the bucket and you refresh the page, you can see that my voice files is public. So anybody can view things in this bucket. And these two here are the names of your buckets, which you'll need for that function to work. So now you've got these two buckets. Now we're going to go on and create the function. Before we create the function, we need to just enable some APIs. So look for event arc and just click on that. and just enable the Event Arc API. I'll explain it all in a second. So now you've got that API set up. Just go into Cloud Run and click on Create Service. Click on this, use Inline Editor to create a function, and call your function something. Let's call it text to, let's not put it into Belgium. Let's put it into London. You can put it wherever you want to, but make sure that the location you put it into is inside the region that you've defined your storage buckets to be in. So if your storage buckets are in the EU, make sure this is in a EU region. The runtime is Python, because that's what we've written the script in, and it's Python 3.1.3. And now you need to add a trigger. Now that is why we enabled that API, so that you can set this up properly. So you need a cloud storage trigger, because what we wanted to do is we wanted this function to fire when you have loaded your text file into that first bucket. And by enabling the API first, when you click on this create a trigger, you get all the right trigger events and options. So you can see on the right here, by default, it gives it a name, obviously, tells you I want it for cloud storage, and I want it when the object is finalized. So not when it first hits the bucket, when it's done. And I want to tell it which bucket. And the bucket I want is this one. And now comes the next slightly tricky bit. So you can use the default compute service account, or you can set up your own. Let's just stick with default at the moment. Just makes life a lot easier if you just want to have this one service. But you can set up your own. But if you set up your own, just remember that you need to add these permissions to it. And I can show you that later. So we grant that, and we grant that. And let's save this trigger. And you keep this require authentication. I'll explain that for a second in terms of IAM, identity access management. Just keep as default, click create, and then enable this last function. I keep saying function, API. And it will now create this function with some example code, and it'll create the trigger for you as well. Once that has happened, we can add our function in here. And again, I'm showing you this in a visual user interface. This can all be done by typing in the command line, but let's just do it this way for now. So the function I will have shared with you, but what you do is you go in here, Control A, Control V, and you have then pasted the function. One thing you need to make sure is you need to, up here, give it the right entry point. And the entry point is process TTS, text to speech input. All that this does is that if you're running this function, go here to this part of the code first. And then the other one that you need to change is in requirements.txt. You need to just paste in the following. So what this is saying is, I need the functions framework, I need cloud storage in order to work, and I need the text-to-speech API. You save and redeploy that, and this should work. So what it's now going to do is going to rebuild this function, which takes some time. And while it's doing that, you can navigate away. And while all of that is happening, let me just explain what this function actually does, because I think that'll be useful. And what you need to do before you paste this function. So there are three things you need to do. In the input bucket, you need to put the name of the bucket that you have called your input bucket, where the text files are going. And you have to put the name of the output bucket exactly as it appears. And then the third one that you need to put in is the project ID. easiest place to find it is just up here in the URL. Project equals whatever your project is, and just put that in. And after that, that's all you need to change. You're good to go. But if you want to know what's going on, then this first part of the function literally goes through a markdown file and strips out the things that you wouldn't want the voice to say, like the pound sign. So you don't want it to go hash, hash, hash. This is a long piece of research, hash, hash, hash. So it just cleans up a text file. It removes any backslashes, trailing slashes. It removes any formatting for bold, italic. It goes through it. It removes any formatting for bulleted lists because the converter won't know how to speak those properly. And then it creates a little bit of a cleanup so that that file is not full of lots of white space, which creates big long pauses. You get the idea. So it generally works. And then it makes sure that it creates the output file name the way it's been defined here. And this function will only accept files which end in .md or .txt because it's looking for text files. And the reason why I've created around Markdown is because it also then provides a file format where I know what needs to be stripped. And it doesn't just strip the bolding, but it also tells the speech that there's an emphasis here. So it just ends up with a nicer voice at the end of it. What else is important? Let me just keep going. This may be important to you. So here, the language code, I have defined it to be British English, and I've given it this name. Now, these you can find, and I'll put it in the description links. These options you can find on the Google API documentation, but I may just strip that out because reading that is just, well, it's a mess. And that is basically all it does. And the reason why we can do this big, long file, because the initial format of this function was using the default text to speech, and that's limited to 5,000 characters. You then had the function did a ridiculous amount of work. It chunked it into 5,000. It brought everything together. But there is this API which is called synthesize long audio. And you can literally just chuck the whole thing in and it works. Makes the function a lot simpler. One problem with it though, it's in public late beta. I've talked to Google, it's being finalized soon. And when I say talked, I've messaged emails back and forth. And the one thing that you cannot do, even if you want to, is change if you want to use that long API, is change this bit. It'll only work in that, despite what it says on the public documentation that you can then change that to MP3. You can't if you're using this long audio request. So you'll get your files in WAV files. We can write functions to then turn them into MP3s and be more compressed. But to be honest, this is not going to cost you very much. And if you've set up a cloud project for the first time, probably not going to pay anything because you get $300 of credit. And yeah, it's not worth the hassle. So now we have the function ready and running and good to go. Will it work though? That's the next test. So now you should see a fully built text to voice function. But there's one more thing that we need to do. So you want to find the cloud text to speech API and you want to hit enable. So now that you've got that enabled and working, your cloud function text to voice should run. So let's test it. So go back to your cloud storage buckets and you'll see this new bucket that's been added here. It's not really a storage bucket, but it is what enables that trigger to fire. So if you load a file, the function will know when you've loaded a file. Don't delete it. I made that mistake about 2 years ago. Creates a mess. So you'll see that happening. And then go into your bucket where you're going to load the file And let's do it manually. I'll show you how we can make this automated by using make.com. Let's upload a small MD file, like this is my retrospective. Now, what will happen is that upload will trigger that function. It'll convert it to voice, and you should see a voice file in the output bucket. So let's go there. And there you go. You've got a voice file. I can, in theory, click on it.
This week we migrated digitizing events to Webflow for better templates, but for better performance.
I created one earlier. Let me show you. So here it is. This is like, I just want to show it to you. This is like a big piece of research that I'm doing about what some of the signals are around AI adoption failure and so on. So it's a massive file. Let's load this one. So let's go back in here, and it'll only work on the new upload. We go upload files. Let's upload the massive research. So while we're waiting for this massive research to be synthesized into a voice file, let me just explain what's happening here. You've built a microservice, basically. Microservices are small little chunks of code that do one job, do them well, so you know that that is all it's doing. There aren't that many moving parts. When a new file hits this bucket here, it triggers that function, which uses the text-to-speech service by Google and turns it into a voice file and puts it into that final bucket. So you could stop here, you're done. But what I'm going to show you next is how you use Make to automate that upload. And even better with Make is how you expose that ability to upload to Claude. So if you're doing the research in Claude, you can just go, hey, here's my file, turn it into an MD and send it to this action, which will do what you've just done manually, upload the file for you. And then the only thing that's missing is how do we know when it's done? So that's another little tiny cloud function that will, the same way as this one gets triggered by listening to a file being created, you've got one more trigger when the voice file has been created in the other bucket, and it sends that information wherever you want to send it. I've chosen to send it to Make. You can just trigger an email, which I'll also do through Make, but the job is done. So let's have a look and see. Oh yeah, there it is. Massive research saying. Let's have a little listen because it's public, so we can click anyway.
The statistics are sobering but predictable. 70 to 95% of AI initiatives fail to deliver expected value, mirroring identical resistance patterns from internet adoption 30 years ago.
So that, in my view, is pretty good. Now, to finish off the text-to-voice function, I'm going to show you a way of sending your research straight from Claude to that function. But you can choose to automate it any which way. As literally all you need to do is upload the file into that storage bucket. I'm going to show you how to do that in Make. So very simply, step one, go in here and type in storage, and you will see the Google Cloud Storage module. So click on that. And what you want to do is upload an object, basically upload a file. So you go upload an object and you create a connection. So I've already created a connection, and in the description, I'm going to send you to a link where in Make, there is a description about how you add that. So in essence, what you put in here is your project ID and the bucket you want to send it to, which you should know by now. And here's a neat trick. And it's like, if you uncheck this map thing, it'll show you all the projects that you've got, but I just put it in. So we've got these two, which we need. And then just to save it, just put in for now and data for now. And I'll show you what happens next. And content type, you can leave blank. Simple upload is fine. Save that. Now, in order for a Make scenario to work with Claude, it needs to be on demand. So first off, let's make it on demand. Save it. You can go ahead and activate it. Really doesn't matter. I'll show you what happens next. Now here's the trick. What we need to do is we need to add some input variables. So we go, let's put in file name and give it a description, because now you're going to be talking to a GPT. It's text called markdown file. So it now understands what you're talking about. Add another input, which is file data. See, and you put in the contents of this markdown / text file. Remember, GPTs are stupid. You need to tell them everything. So this gives them context. And then we need one more thing. So let's go return outputs. And this is something I've learned, right? So just put in return message, just like this. And that allows us to send information back to Claude saying something's gone wrong, or comes up, you're all good, right? So let's go in here and then put in scenario, return output, and then return message. We go, well, you can type in whatever you want, but success, you will get an email, save that. So that happens if everything works well. The next thing you want to do is just add an error handler. Right click on it, click add error handler, and then the same thing. Go scenarios, return output, and the return message this time will be what the error is. So this is a really simple scenario. It just literally, it takes the information, loads it to a bucket, says double thumbs up, you're done, or if there's an error, which does happen because sometimes the API is going to work. Funny enough, actually hasn't happened yet to me, but just in case it does, you get something logical back to Claude, so that Claude goes, oh yeah, that went wrong. So save all of that. And now you're like going, okay, how does all this work with Claude? So this is the next thing. In Make, go to your dashboard. They're doing lots and lots of updates, so this may change. You may have to do a bit of Googling, but if you go in here and you go profile, and then you go API access, you get the MCP connector. And I recorded a short video about how to make all these connections. So I'll link to that. You can watch it, but it's super simple. You just copy that and paste it into Claude. Because now that you have that on-demand scenario called Upload MD, where the one thing I would actually counsel you to do is go in here and click edit the description and let it know what's going on. You just give it a description, convert to voice, send markdown and file name. This action will send an email with the file and return the file, because again, GPTs need to be told everything. So that's what it does. So once you've got it set up, what you will have is in your make connection in Claude, you'll have a load of tools, and I've got a ton, but you will have something like upload MD file, right, which is the one we created earlier. And what you can now do is, for example, you may have got a load of research done by Claude and it's given you everything you need. And you can then go and give it a command like this. You can now push this to the voice to action command. So when that gets pushed behind the scenes, it will send the file, which you see here, to that scenario, which will upload it to the bucket, and it'll do that whole round trip, and you'll get an email notification. So this is a way of you hooking it up to Claude. But just to finish this, if you think about it, you've got a storage bucket where everything that you want to have happen now happens as soon as a file is loaded to that bucket. You can continue to load information manually if you choose to. The other thing that I've done is for certain other actions, I have created a scenario where it watches a Google Drive folder, and if I dump anything in there, it'll just send it on that same round trip. But the most important part is that microservice, which turns text to voice. Now you have a choice about how you want to push information into that microservice, and it's pretty standardized because as soon as you put it into the bucket, everything works. So I've run it through Google Drive. I've connected it up to OpenAI. I've found a way of getting Perplexity to send information over as well. But yeah, you're basically done. And, it works really well. Hasn't failed me yet. It does really long documents. And you can just listen to them when you're out and about, if that's what you want to do. So thanks again for watching. Thanks again for supporting. Your comments. If you have any issues with any of this, let me know. I'll jump in and help.